At my father's request and my mother's insistence, I tried to keep myself out of trouble and avoid any unnecessary entanglements. The demographics of the area are quite diverse, with blacks, Hispanics, Italians, Jews, and predominantly hard-nosed Dutch. They are not of Amish or Mennonite descent, but staunchly German, Lutheran, who dominate the area. Nonetheless, I found it relatively easy to fit in, though I couldn't help but yearn for the camaraderie of my Philadelphia friends. I started out in the job market, initially driving a fuel oil delivery truck, and over time transitioned to working indoors, taking care of scheduling and orders. In the not-too-distant future, I was able to effortlessly develop friendships with the opposite sex, and my social life exceeded my expectations. When I married, my mother was slightly disappointed that my spouse, Elena, was not of Italian descent, but she made every effort to ensure that Elena was unreservedly and warmly welcomed upon the birth of our 2 children. After the birth of our 2 children, Elena advocated that I undergo a vasectomy. I had no problem with the idea, but as the children started school, Elena expressed her desire to return to employment. I was not opposed to Elena's decision to work, but I was uncomfortable with the idea of her extensive association with people from her past, some of whom I did not particularly care for. Instead, I turned away from these activities and the people associated with them, believing them to be elitist and focused only on mutual admiration, and even though Elena and I had both been in relationships, we never talked about it and just tacitly agreed not to delve into our respective pasts. After 6 months, it became obvious to me that the problem was at a breaking point, and that's when the seminar began. I don't see what the problem is, it's only for 3 days, I've already made arrangements, your mom will take care of the kids while I'm gone, and you'll be home in the evenings, so you can cook your own meals. Elena seemed oblivious to my growing unease, arguing that I couldn't believe she had the audacity to ask who else was going to be at the seminar. Hearing his name brought a small smile to my face. It was amazing that she hadn't realized that I already knew about the secret lunches and late-night work sessions with her immediate supervisor. I don't know what you're talking about, she replied innocently. I've known about you and Derek for 6 months now, and if you think I'm going to let you go out with him for 3 days, you're crazy, I retorted, my tone tinged with bitterness. Marco, you've got it all wrong, Derek's my husband, and there's nothing going on between us, and I'd never lie to you about it, you know? I glanced down at the empty Budweiser bottle in my hand and couldn't help but tighten my grip. Slowly I stood up from my chair and walked towards the kitchen with clenched fists. There was silence all around me as I returned to my seat. You've been a good mother to our children, Elena, that's the only reason you're still here. I've talked to my mom about all of this and she advised me to stand firm. I hope you come to your senses for the sake of the kids. If I leave you, the court will award you custody and I can't let that happen. When she confronted me, I readily admitted it. I took a big gulp of beer and couldn't help but giggle. Derek lives at 321 Davie Road, just 3 blocks from your office. You and your boss go to his house often. You and your boss go to his house often, usually 3 times a week, each time staying for almost 3 hours. Can you please tell me what really happens in those 3 hours? As long as you don't publicly humiliate me or my family, I won't take drastic measures, but if the situation changes, it's all over. You can stay or you can leave, but you'll never take my children from me, I declared firmly. It was the first time she ever broke down on me and the first time she ever said derogatory things about my legacy. My relationship with her finally surfaced. We had 2 sons, Harry and Jack, who shared a room with bunk beds. My dream turned into a nightmare. The seminar was never brought up again. Elena stopped working as the years went by and she started bringing her lunch to work. The atmosphere in the house wasn't just cold, it was icy cold. My mother hadn't gotten any new information from her church acquaintances, and despite my reservations, I reluctantly agreed to accompany Elena to her Christmas party. The company had rented a spacious hall with a dance floor, plush buffet tables, and several open bars. The only empty tables were located near the top of the company, but they were obviously empty, as the employees seemed intent on avoiding those seats. I was more than happy to let her have her way on the dance floor, because I don't like to dance. As I was on my 3rd beer, I couldn't help but notice Elena and Duke across the room exchanging glances. When my wife excused herself to go to the restroom, I quickly scanned the room and realized that she was directly missing. She could easily meet him at work without any risk of being caught. I couldn't shake the feeling that her motive was to humiliate me by flaunting her relationship with Doyle in front of everyone. Alana disappeared down the hallway toward the restrooms, where Derek's cronies stood clustered around one of the bars with smug smiles before I made my own way to the restroom. They didn't seem to know how to help or guide them through this unexpected situation. I entered the empty women's restroom and then ventured into the men's. I grabbed DK by the collar and forced him against the wall, ignoring my wife's frantic cries, and quickly pushed him to the floor, silencing the otherwise bustling hall as I dragged Dirk to the center of the floor by his tie. Alina stood in the doorway, her expression both shocked and incredulous, unsure if her distress was directed at what I'd done to her lover or the humiliating statement I'd made to her coworker, which, frankly, was none of my business. Before I left, I kicked him hard to make sure he wouldn't soon forget the encounter, and he collapsed to the ground in agony without a word from the onlookers. My hastily packed bag consisted mainly of socks and underwear, along with a few shirts and pants. Just in case. Before I left, I retrieved the cash from the rafters in the basement, and considering the low interest rate offered by the bank, I opted to put 62. As I was about to turn out the lights, a cab pulled up and dropped Elena off at the doorstep of her house, where she sat down on the couch without a sound, her expression not so much of anger as of worried, more uneasy than scared. It was a little after 9 when I pulled onto the skull-killing highway, and it was a good thing my party didn't last long. At least I decided to spend a couple of days in the city of Atlanta before heading home, but first I had to find my old friend Luca, who ran a sandwich store in our old neighborhood, not one of those flashy places you read about in Philadelphia guidebooks, but rather one that provided a neighborhood providing local amenities. He lives on the second floor and operates out of the back room. Meeting Luca was like a trip down memory lane. After explaining my predicament, he agreed to give me a hand. "Marco, it's going to cost you $20. Can you handle it?" I replied confidently, "Do you want to be messy, or do you want peace and quiet?" "I want to go to Atlantic City. How about 6 days and 7 nights at the Taj Mahal?" Luca suggested. "What are you talking about?" "Bella, it's Luca. Get yourself all dolled up and get your ass over here." Luca instructed a few words on the phone and then smiled and continued, "No, it's not like that. You're going on a vacation, Marco. Do you remember Bella, my brother Michael's oldest son?" Luca asked me. "She's 23 years old now, Marco, and she's not chubby anymore." I suddenly realized that Bella would be joining me at the beach. The thought disturbed me a little considering she was Luca's niece, but then again he was the one who planned the whole thing. "Marco, do you have a credit card?" Luca asked. I had two and I was going to cancel them Monday morning. As I considered his suggestion, Bella walked into my room. "Marco, I haven't seen you since you moved here. You look great," Bella exclaimed. Her dark eyes were mesmerizing and the baby fat that remained on her seemed to have transferred to her chest. Before I could react, Luca interjected, "The marriage is over, Bella. Marco needs a companion now, and I know you've always been fond of him, so you were the first person I thought of." Luca explained, "I'm not asking you to have sex with him, just to be there for him, to help him get over his troubles." "I'm sorry." She smiled and swept a glance between Luca and I and said, "I'd be happy to go with you, Marco, but you have to promise to buy me some saltwater toffee." We both laughed. "I'll need an hour to get ready, and Luca needs to make sure he doesn't drink anything. I don't want to drive there with a drunk." The drive to Atlantic City went smoothly, except for the fact that I detailed Alina's problems to Bella, and her only reaction was, "Oh, poor kids." Bella cringed when she saw the double bed in our room, but luckily she didn't notice my suppressed giggles. I had a strong hunch that by the end of the week we'll only be using one of the beds. We often strolled along the boardwalk with relish. The first night we saw every show in town. I remained a gentleman, but by noon of the second day Bella and I were sparking between the sheets as we prepared for dinner. On the fourth day, we had uninvited guests. 2 men stood on our doorstep wearing sports jackets instead of suits. "We were from the Berks County Special Crimes Unit. Can I have a word with you?" Marco Romano Lewis introduced them. Bella came out of the bathroom in her underwear. I inquired, "We would like to discuss your relationship with the director." LS replied, "I don't have a relationship with the director, my wife does." "We understand what Mr. Romano is saying. We know you had a verbal altercation with him last Friday at the Continental Insurance Company Christmas party," Coleman explained. "Did he press charges?" I inquired. "No, he is missing and we would like your help in locating him." Coleman replied, "Gentlemen, before we go any further, I would like to let, if you can't make arrangements, I need an attorney. I have an attorney in Reading, and I assert that the visitors did not respond immediately. Bella was dressed and we were going out to dinner. Sorry, gentlemen, we're at 6 o'clock and the safari wager is still unpaid. I can talk to you this Friday if need be." I offered to say that they seemed surprised by my answer. "Why do you suspect that something's happened to this guy?" Coleman revealed that Bella was already dressed and I had my jacket on. "I've been here since Friday night. You can check with the hotel staff if you don't mind. We're going to leave for a bit and any further questions can wait until Friday." We rode down together in the elevator but didn't speak again. Once we got to the lobby, they walked towards the hotel security, while Bella and I went on safari. Harry and Jack greeted me warmly when I arrived home, and the saltwater toffee I brought back made them even happier. After the discussion with the police, I spent the rest of the afternoon with the kids and made plans to talk to Elena later that evening. With the kids already settled in front of the TV, I took a seat at the kitchen table and waited patiently for Elena to finish cleaning up. Her tone wasn't accusatory or angry, rather, she seemed genuinely worried. Her eyes darted between me and the room, waiting for an answer. "I've been in Atlantic City all week, and I haven't seen TK since the party." She told me he deserved it, to which I retorted that she seemed to have run out of questions. "What were you doing in the men's room with him?" I pressed further. "I had to quit my job. There was no way I was going back. I let the kids out of school because your mom said you might be home today." Elena admitted it was time to tackle the problem head on. "I asked you why and you answered me. I insisted that I didn't know why. You were sitting there like a lost puppy while we thought we could capitalize on the opportunity. I asked you why and you answered me. I insisted that I didn't know why. You were sitting there like a lost puppy while we thought we could capitalize on the opportunity. We didn't know he would react like that. You went berserk." I freaked out, she confessed, her voice shaking with excitement. At least she showed some emotion, but her explanation made no sense. No, their intentions were clear, and Elena's excuses wouldn't change that fact. "Elena, you have 3 choices. You can choose to stay here and fulfill your responsibilities as the mother of your children. You can choose to get a divorce, leave here, and lose custody of your children. I won't tolerate any more flirtations with Dirk or anyone else, and I'm adamant that I won't leave." At the mention of Dirk's name, Elena bursts into tears, and before she has time to make a decision, she fled from the room, sobbing uncontrollably. The police questioned me a few more times and then stopped their investigation. Derek was last seen outside the hospital being picked up by a cab, but he's still missing, and despite his family offering a reward for information, there are no leads. Even though we were still legally married, everyone knew that Elena and I were no longer married. She visited her parents and sister regularly, which didn't bother me, and there was no indication that she was seeing anyone else, even though she quit her job after the Christmas party and showed no interest in getting another job. I took care of all the outdoor chores, making sure that the lawn and surroundings were well maintained. Felina had a weekly allowance of $200 to cover household expenses, daily necessities, and personal needs. During Thanksgiving and Christmas, the kids and I often spent the holidays with our family in Bella's company. Whenever Harry or Jack brought up the matter, Elena and I steadfastly refused to discuss it with them, and I understood her position, but what could she say? My brief explanations hardly reflected the complexity of our relationship, the constant complications and differences of opinion, but we managed to work through them. At first, Bella and I got along well, but as time went on, she began to spend more time with her family in Philadelphia and less time with me. I can't blame her. I appreciated her efforts to ease the breakup, and despite the challenges, I found myself unable to divorce Elena and ask her to leave as long as the kids were still in the house. These were my limitations, but I had to abide by them. I hated the whole situation, but I couldn't come up with an alternative plan. But the boys came up with something. When Harry was 16, things came to a breaking point. Unfortunately, Jack witnessed the altercation and insisted on intervening to protect his brother. As a result, he lost 2 of his teeth, but his support won Harry's admiration, and while bringing the boys home, Arlena was at the gate, greeted us, and Harry immediately questioned his mother as to why she had not been honest with them about what had happened all those years ago, and Elena remained silent and did not come to the defense of her oldest son. I took Jack to the dentist and left the 2 of them alone to work out their issues. Jack didn't seem bothered by the missing teeth, but I was worried about the upcoming dentist bill. When we got home, Elena was nowhere to be found. Her car was still parked, but she left without saying a word, leaving Harry at a loss for words. Elena's parents and sister remained silent. To me, a week passed with no word from Elena. Her whereabouts and intentions remained a mystery. Bella and I decided to move in together. Initially, it felt awkward to share a bed. I didn't inquire as to what Bella had done, and I didn't want to find out. Bella took on all of the responsibilities that Elena had once taken on perfectly, in an effort to simplify things. I gave her a couple of credit cards. Although the situation had improved, I was still legally married. 2 months after Elena's whereabouts were unknown, I decided to take action and report her missing to the police. I knew the divorce would take a year, so I planned ahead and strategized for the future. Gradually, life in the house settled into a new rhythm, and Harry and Jack adapted well to Bella's presence, but they never referred to her as Mom, preferring to call her Bella. 2 weeks later, Bella and I came to Elkton and exchanged VS's, cementing our relationship as Harry graduated and joined the Air Force and Jack went to meet cutting school in Toledo. Mom and Dad moved to Ocala, instructing us to promise to visit them at least twice a year, but there was no strong bond to keep us in reading. Mira and I decided to return to our old stomping grounds of Philadelphia, and Jack graduated from his school and took a job at a prestigious butcher store in Westchester. A year later, we found ourselves attending Bella's niece's wedding, a quintessential Italian celebration in the city of brotherly love. I noticed that Bella showed a hint of uneasiness, her eyes wandering across the dance floor several times as I tried to discover what had captured her attention, but found nothing out of the ordinary. However, when she excused herself to go to the restroom, a feeling of uneasiness surged through me, and I watched her as she walked to the back of the hall, where I noticed her meeting up with an old friend of hers in the midst of chatting and socializing. She approached one of Luca's assistants and gestured to a nearby table where 3 guys and 3 girls were seated, all of whom looked like they were trying desperately to impress. "You need to stay calm. In a few minutes one of the guys at Janet's table will come over and provoke you." "What do you mean, provoke me?" "Yes, by the time Thomas and the others are ready, you may need to repel one of them, but that should do it." "What do you mean, cooperate with him?" "Let him insult me, then agree with him if he calls me a whore, ask him how much he's willing to pay, that sort of thing, but whatever you do, don't let him provoke you." "What's all this about? Why are these people after me?" "Look at Janet's table." "Well, the point is the woman with the short platinum blonde hair. Look closer." "Wow, that's Elena. What's she doing here?" "Elena's boyfriend has some sort of connection with the bride. I guess she's here for revenge." "You and Luca's people go and take care of this here, Janet, and I'll go to the women's restroom and talk to Elena." It's not going to be a pleasant experience. When I noticed Elena's companion getting up from her seat, I stood up and politely greeted Bella at the table. Bella gave me a curious look but didn't seem to care. I sauntered over to the side exit where people were smoking. I ordered them to leave in a firm tone of voice, and surprisingly they left without any resistance. I walked a short distance, paused, and then turned back to the 3 men who were smiling at first, but their expressions quickly spiked as the door clicked shut behind them, their smiles disappearing when they realized that 3 bat-wielding figures and the father of the bride were waiting for them. "I apologize for inconveniencing you and your family on this special night. I feel like a character in a gangster movie. Thank you for handling this discreetly." I went inside to look for Bella. They stayed behind to clean up the mess. I felt it was time to leave, but I couldn't find Bella, and Elena's table was now unoccupied. Jack had learned of the commotion and found me at the bar with a few of his friends. "Dad, what's going on?" My initial instinct was to keep quiet, but failed. "Your mom was here with her new boyfriend." "I don't need to hear any more than that," he replied with a smile, and ordered a beer from the bartender and ordered a beer. We chatted about other topics for about an hour, and finally Bella showed up looking a little worse for wear. I asked her, "Where have you been?" and she smiled mischievously. "Janet and I had to chaperone your ex. It was a long and eventful night, but full of laughter. We never ran into Elena again, and Bella and I are still happily married and living in our old neighborhood, and life couldn't be better." Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please consider bookmarking and subscribing, and if you haven't already, feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below.